Welcome to Good Burger Reviews. My name is John and I'm here to review a brand new 2025 movie, and that movie is Other.
Say it again. I'm beautiful.
I'm beautiful.
There's a lot of wildlife around here.
Don't show your face!
I'm beautiful.
This movie was released in October of 2025. It is directed by David Moreau. It is starring Olga Kurylenko and Philip Schurer. The basic overview: Alice returns home after her mother's death to find the house unchanged and haunted by a dark presence. As field builds, buried trauma resurfaces and the terrifying truth is revealed. So as we're wrapping up October and getting towards Halloween, I thought it would be a great time to watch a spooky movie on Shudder. And the newest one out is Other. It is a French film. Now this one has many of what I would say has traditional spooks, haunts, bumps in the nights, but it's kind of mixed because there's kind of a gimmick going along with this one. So let's break down this movie, the good, the bad, the ugly, and figure out if Other is a good watch for a streamer. Now I will say this movie is original in some ways. It has a gimmick, it has lots of haunts, lots of spooks, and I would say, well, let's just rip the band-aid off. The gimmick is they don't really show anyone's face in this movie except for the main girl. And I noticed it right away as the movie opened. It was like she's with her boyfriend and they're having a good time in the bedroom. And I noticed that, you know, he's goofing off, but they never really show his face, and he's in this bath towel and it's over his head, and he's just kind of being strange with it. But like, I didn't think much of it until the scene ended, and I thought, well, we saw the girl, but how come we didn't see the guy? And then we go into another scene where another character is shown, but his face isn't being shown. And I thought, is this a coincidence? And then I thought the second character was a male, and I thought, well, are they not showing men's face? Or is it just they're not going to show anyone's face? Now the girl, the main star, we've already seen her face, so I know at least we're going to get one face in it. But as the movie progressed and as another character showed up on screen, they were very creative of how their faces were either blurred, not completely shown. You know, if you ever remember that TV show Home Improvement from back in the 1990s, you know, Tim the Toolman's neighbor, Wilson, who was always over the fence, you know, you never saw his face. You never saw his whole face. You always saw like this. And I started thinking, wow, you have a movie starring, you know, a ton of Wilsons. And I'm like, there's no faces. And as the movie progressed, I thought, is this just going to be a gimmick, or is it going to tie into the actual movie? Now, I thought maybe it did because
I'm beautiful. I'm beautiful.
So our main girl, Alice, has been summoned home, and she's come to find out that her mom, who she's really been in not good touch with, has passed away. And they show mom, you know, in the opener getting killed, and her face gets eaten off. And I thought, was there, but the way they showed it, it was like they didn't really show the death. They just showed her dying, and then she was left out in the woods for a while. It happens outside on her own property. And, you know, when you first finally see the body and you think, oh, and there's no face. And I thought, well, was the face eaten off? Or did the animals come later and eat the face off? This is where I started to get mixed, because I thought, all right, so this girl, because they have this whole gimmick going on with the no faces, and Alice is, you know, she's alone, and she's not really talking to many people because she's traveled from like LA to Minneapolis, by the way. Now, here's the thing. She's the way they get her to get stuck in this house kind of irritated me, because it's like a combination of, and this character in this movie somewhat does remind me of The Strangers Chapter 2. Now, those of you who saw my review of The Strangers Chapter 2 know I was not a big fan of that movie, a lot because of how dumb the characters were. And I feel like in this one, Alice does seem smarter than Maya from The Strangers Chapter 2. She does at least make some good decisions, but there's also a lot of bad decisions. So, like, for example, she doesn't like her house. She was on bad terms with her mom, but she stays there. And not only does she stay there, but she gets stranded there. And the way she gets stranded there is because she literally is ready to leave. She thinks she's going to settle up her mom's death in 48 hours and is mistaken. And she's ready to go, and like she can't find her keys. And I think, okay, well, maybe they're not going to spend a whole lot of time on her, how long it took her to find or not find her keys. But like she's already like ordering a rental and trying to figure another way out. And I thought, you don't like the house. It's already strange. Your mom died there. You know, why don't you Uber out? Take a bus, you know, take a cab, call a ride, something. Because, like, I mean, it just seemed weird that she chose to stay in this house at all. And now it just seems like the house is kind of causing her to stay. Like, weird things are happening. You know, keys are disappearing. Things are happening. And she keeps getting, like, more and more stuck. It was kind of like Steve Martin and the Out-of-Towners. Just terrible things, a calamity events, bad things just keep happening to the main character to cause her to be stuck. And this leads me to another thing that I was mixed on. There seemed to be a very tonal shift on this, because it seems to be a kind of a somber movie. You know, kind of how I said it about Hell House LLC Lineage. It was very somber, but then there was like an insertion of some extremely comical parts. Well, the same thing kind of happens here, where not as much comedy, but like so Alice is like stuck at home, and all of a sudden she decides that she's going to, and you come to find out that she's like a former beauty queen and prom queen and Miss Teen Minnesota and all that stuff. Now she's middle aged, you know, she's up there in age, you know, she keeps having like flashbacks to like when she was a teenager, which is like the 1990s. And she ends up having like this little beauty pageant, like trying on outfits. So like another thing that was weird, like, you know, she puts her clothes in the washer and dryer, and then when she gets the clothes out, her clothes are all shredded, which then leads to her having like this music montage of trying on outfits in her own house, the house that she grew up in, her mom's house. And it just came off as so weird, because I'm like, are we watching like a 2025 French horror film? Or are we watching like a 1985's montage where two girls are at the mall and trying on dresses? And I said the same thing in Bring Her Back, where there was songs that were being played that just didn't seem to fit the tone of the movie. And this was happening here as well. So as we cross into the negatives, you know, it does seem like the more stupid decisions are being made by our main protagonist, final girl, or only girl, because she's really like the only character in this movie, in that, you know, and that's why I put this in a negative. Lack of dialogue. You know, there's a lot of her just roaming around the house, roaming around the woods. So like there's also this other thing going on, which I thought was weird. When she gets there, like she's being stalked by like what seemed like to be like a neighbor kid, and the kid had like a mask on, and he's on a bike, and there's this drone all the time, and it's like the kid is really a pest. But of course you have this whole thing where we're not going to show faces, so like look, this neighbor kid, who you think is the neighbor kid, is wearing a mask. There's also other people who approach the house, like the car rental guy, a neighbor person, and every time they're shown, they're talking through a door, they're talking through an eye peephole, or through a camera where the camera lens is either blurred or shattered, or the image is cracked. it's staying with that whole no face thing. But this girl's already unhappy. She's already having, a rough time of it. And she decides to go outside at night. And I thought, why are we outside at night? This is pretty, we're in Minnesota. We're in the woods. It's not like a suburban area or even a city area. It's definitely out in the outskirts of somewhere. Now, the character was giving me a mismatch too. Like, she really, like, there was parts where she was making me laugh and parts where I was getting ticked off at her. Because, like, sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I'll pick up my phone and I'll be like, Google, why in the world is this happening to me? And how do you get out of this situation? We're always relying on her phone. Well, she picks up her phone and she's like, she's suspecting that she's pregnant. And she picks up her phone and she's like, Google, how do I give myself a pregnancy test without a pregnancy test? And like, she's asking Google all these funny questions, and Siri or Google's like, I don't have an answer for that. And I literally was cracking up because I do the same thing with my phone when I'm frustrated. I start arguing with an AI character. Now, there was another little neat scene where this neighbor kid, or what you think is this neighboring kid, leads you to believe that, like, she gets across this, like, Bilko door, like these two doors, like a cellar door, but it's in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods, and she hears, like, this screaming from inside. After she's already had, like, she's been chased, and she tried to climb over the fence. She was definitely trying to get out, and she climbs over this fence, and she has this, and only some of you will get this, she has this Ron Macbeth moment where she gets caught on this fence and her ring finger gets caught on barbed wire, and it was gross. She is dangling by her finger that's caught on barbed wire that's on a ring, and her finger's on a ring, and it was intense, but it was getting a little gross to watch. It's not like she did a push-up on a pavilion or anything like that. She was trying to climb a barbed wire fence to escape whatever the antagonist in this movie is, and we still haven't really figured it out, because I wasn't sure if it was the kid, if it was the dog, if it was the ghost of the mom. It was very vague about what it was. I felt like there was a lot of animal references. There was this whole thing where she had like an animal collar, and then like this animal collar was really interesting. Like, she put it up against the door and the door would open, like a kiosk lock or something, and it's like, when the door would open, it would say animal entering. I'm like, what type of animal leash is this? So she's approaching the cellar door in the woods, and she's hearing screaming. She opens the cellar door. She could hear that someone down in the basement of this whatever is being tormented, or, and when she climbs down, which I thought was another dumb decision. You're already having issues. Why would you go down into a cellar in the middle of nowhere in the woods after you've already practically lost your finger? Your finger is basically dangling off, being held on by your own ring. She goes down there, and when she gets down there, you think she's going to find a struggling person, but it's a walkie-talkie, and it was a trick. Then the little neighbor kid flips the door down and locks her in, and he's got the other end of the walkie-talkie, and he's like, oh, stay down there, I'll be back tomorrow. And she's like, call the police. And this kid ain't listening to any of that, and he's like, now here's another thing that was weird. He said he was going to come back tomorrow, but he came back before tomorrow. It seemed like he came back in the middle of the night. Okay, so let's say we're on the full spoilers part, because I will say there was a very intense scene at the end when she finally, for some reason, the kid lets her out of the house. Oh, and that's because faceless boyfriend, is shown up in his car. She did find out that she was pregnant, and he wanted to come, and she was going to be there longer than 48 hours, and he wanted to be with his girl, and he shows up, and here's another thing where I said, just like in The Strangers, just like in Push, whatever this is never gets the girl, but like gets boyfriend really fast. And I'm like, maybe that was on purpose, because when you find out who the antagonist is, it might make sense. So clearly the scariest scene, it was kind of giving me like when Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs is using night vision, and she's going through that house in the dark looking for Buffalo Bill. Well, this girl ends up with this phone or some sort of device where it's kind of like night vision and the battery's dying on it. And it was a very intense scene, but it was like really drawn out. Like you're waiting for a jump scare, and they draw it out too long where it's like, all right, then you've given up on the fact that the jump scare is going to come, and then eventually something comes, but it doesn't. They didn't have the timing right on that, but it was very intense and the scariest part of the movie. Now there's this other scene. Now I'll tell you something else. Alice, I don't know if I would want Alice from Other in this room, because there's this one scene where she goes completely ham on an entire set of VHSs. Now there's a wardrobe twice as big as this, a chest twice as big as this, of VHSs that she's been watching throughout the movie, and they're all video recordings of her and her mother from like the late 90s, and her mother is kind of abusive. Now it makes sense why, like her mother's like, oh, you weigh too much, and I could see the fat on you, and it, you know, it was a really rough relationship, you know, one of those terrible beauty pageant mom relationships where they, you know, where you literally probably force her to be bulimic. But like there's this one scene where she goes after the VHSs, but also it's because she's, you know, she comes to watch one of the VHSs where she finds out that she gave birth. She gave birth when she was very young. And it turns out she gave birth to, and you know, it's like you think that the baby's dead because like it's very shaky and blurry, but like as the movie unravels more, and you thought it was over, and it kind of, this is one of those ones where it keeps going on after the climax, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is this going to end? Because it kind of, another weak spot was it was very sluggish. It just had a lot of downtime. But here's the whole thing. The baby was living in the attic or living in the woods, and the baby grew up, and it turns out this is the one causing all the problem. This is the one eating all the faces, and ate grandma's face, ate boyfriend's face, was eating other people's faces, and literally this little kid on the bike, it never was really conclusive, or like the lines weren't all 100% connected, but the more and more I think about it, that was the kid. He was wearing the mask. Same kid, you know, and he had said in one of the scenes, like, don't show your face, don't let him look at your face. He's afraid of his own face. He's afraid of mirrors. He's afraid of reflections. So like when it pulls together, sometimes it doesn't 100% make sense in the end. I think that they were really going for like a very artistic, symbolic ending, and you know, she ends up escaping the house, being rescued by all this police. There's this scene where there's like a ton of police, where the gimmick's in high effect because we still only see her face. You know, whether they're angling it or they're blurry on the side or their heads are cut off, it just, you don't see anyone else's face until the way end, when you see she finally comes face to face with what she realizes is her son, and you see his face. And the end, like it ends like that. It just ends. So like, you know, this one, I'll get down to business on it. I feel like I've told the whole story. This one's kind of a rough one. It had some shining moments, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't my taste. So I'm giving Other, which should have been called Mother, a veggie burger. And the reason it was really called Mother, this whole thing with a speak and spell, and we've seen speak and spells in horror movies before, but like, I guess the little kid would use the speak and spell, and he was trying to spell mother, but the M was burned off, so he would just spell other. So like, the only reason this movie is called Mother, or it's called Other, is because there's a burnt M on a I don't know, it didn't come off right at the end. So like, Other. The movie is named Other. It should have been called Mother. Anyhow, it's a veggie burger. You have to have the right taste for it. It is streaming on Shudder. I would say I'll leave it at that. And don't forget to stay scared of those little babies that grow up to be afraid of faces and rip off faces in the deep woods.
Again.
I'm beautiful.
Again.
I'm beautiful.
Again.
I'm a monster.